my 5 tips for pipe smokers who want to try cigars. What's up, everybody? Eric here from Tea and Tobacco. I've received this question a few times, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Let's go. So this has actually come up a couple times, some tips for pipe smokers who want to move into cigars, and some things to avoid, or some habits that pipe smokers may have acquired while smoking a pipe that they should try to avoid while smoking cigars. So right off the bat, the one that I noticed the most is smoking too fast. When you're smoking a pipe, you definitely have to have a little bit more of a speedy cadence, especially compared to cigars. With cigars, a decent cadence is 1 puff, every 45 seconds to a minute, somewhere around there. You kind of have to work. Each cigar has its own kind of idiosyncrasies where you need to see what works best for that cigar, but you definitely don't want to puff it nearly as fast as I pipe. So that's the first thing you definitely want to avoid. And just talking about that, you should be able to hold pretty much right at the burn line, and it should not be too hot. If you feel the cigar getting too hot, maybe past an inch past the burn line, you're probably smoking too fast and need to slow it down a little bit. So that's my first tip. Number 2 is knocking the ash off too early. So this isn't like a cigarette where you need to flick the ash off all the time. If a cigar is constructed well, the ash can easily hold on for an inch or two, no problem. Just like how you leave the ash in your pipe to help kind of cool the tobacco down or cool the burn layer down. Same thing here. It continues to smolder behind the ash and keep your cigar cool. So don't knock your ash off all the time. Really, to remove the ash, just kind of push it against the edge of the ashtray and it should just break off. Don't go tapping it. It can fly everywhere and make a huge mess. So that's my tip number 2. Tip number 3 is do not use soft flame lighters. With pipes, it's okay because when you're drawing the heat from the soft flame onto the tobacco, you're usually, or at least you shouldn't be, drawing the flame completely through the tobacco. You should be drawing it enough that the heat ignites the tobacco, but for the most part, the flame is still curling up, so that incomplete burn continues to go into the air instead of you pulling it into the pipe. With cigars, if you are using a soft flame lighter, that incomplete burn just goes right into the cigar and can definitely cause some off flavors. So what you want to do, you can use matches if you'd like, but I think the best thing to use is definitely a torch lighter because the burn is very complete and definitely helps not get anything gross into your cigar. So that's my 3rd tip. Tip number 4 is don't think you have to smoke this down to nothing. Really, with cigars, just stop when you are not enjoying them anymore. A lot of people will stop at the halfway mark. Some people will stop if there's about a quarter of the cigar left. Somewhere in there is very typical, which is why there's a different length cigars, because a lot of people will stop at the halfway point and not smoke it all the way down to the end, especially because when it starts getting down to the end, the flavors get really, really washed out and kind of hot and gross. So don't feel you need to smoke this down to nothing. If you duck out at the halfway point, it's pretty typical, so not a big deal. And the last thing is really just some general etiquette, is if you're in a cigar bar or something like that and you are done with your cigar, do not stamp it out in the ashtray. Just set it in the ashtray and let it go out on its own. When you stamp it out, it releases a lot of stinky smells and people really do not like when you do that. So that is the last thing you want to do. So there's my last tip. And then just a little piece of information that you might want to know. If your cigar goes out, that's okay. You can just knock the ash off and then relight, but you don't want cigars to be out for too long before you relight them. You don't want these to cool down, because when it cools down, all that smoke and particulates that you've been drawing through the tobacco will solidify in here and give you some really off flavors. So if they're out for like a half hour to an hour or more, I usually just let them go and throw it away at that point, unless I'm really okay with the off flavors that I know I'm going to get, because they get really washed out and they get kind of gross at the end. So if that's the case, just move on. It is how it is. So there you go. Those are my 5 tips plus a little bit of advice on pipe smokers who want to get into cigars. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, comments and questions down below, and I will see you next time on Tea and Tobacco. See you guys.